You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with the Hawks firing Lloyd Pierce and replacing him with Nate McMillan on an interim basis. It's kind of interesting. McMillan was hesitant to take the job because him and Pierce are very close friends. But after Pierce implored him to take the job on at least an interim basis, McMillan said yes. I don't hate the decision to fire Pierce. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. The Hawks were expected to take a big jump this year. I mean, realize they haven't made the playoffs since 16-17. That was also the last time they finished with at least 30 wins. They made some huge moves in free agency. They signed Danilo Gallinari. They signed Bogdan Bogdanovic. They signed Rajon Rondo. I'm pretty sure that I picked the Hawks to make the playoffs in my NBA preview. I don't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure I did. If the season ended today, they'd be the 11th seed. They're 2 games behind the Hornets for the 8th seed. They're slumping right now. There's no question. They're 3-7 in their last 10. Is it impossible for them to make the playoffs? No, it's not impossible. Like I said yesterday, I wouldn't put anything past Trae Young. But it's not the likeliest thing in the world. Here's why I don't love the move to fire Pierce, though. I don't think this is his fault. The injury bug has bitten the Hawks hard this year. DeAndre Hunter has only played in 18 games. Danilo Gallinari has only played in 22. Cam Reddish has missed some games. Bogdan Bogdanovic has only played in 9 games. Rajon Rondo has only played in 18 games. Chris Dunn, a guy who they expected to be a solid bench piece for him this year, hasn't played at all. When you're missing all those guys, and you have to rely on guys like Tony Snell, Solomon Hill, and Brandon Goodwin for big minutes, that's not going to end well for you. I understand that in this coronavirus climate, teams have needed to play shorthanded more than ever. So you may not want to use that as an excuse. But the Hawks have gotten it more than most teams. Not because of the coronavirus, mind you. Just because of miscellaneous injuries. If all these guys had to miss time because of contact tracing or something like that, okay, that's something that every team is aware of. They should know how to address it with their players. If it happens a lot, yeah, that's probably on the coach. But these miscellaneous injuries, how much of that can you really blame on Lloyd Pierce? Now, I don't think Pierce is a good coach. The Hawks have done nothing under him. They were on pace for their best season under him this year. It still would have been an under 500 finish and sneaking into the playoffs. And make no mistake about it, Nate McMillan is a much better coach than Lloyd Pierce. Nate McMillan knows how to get teams into the playoffs. Once they're there, they struggle. The last time a Nate McMillan coached team won a playoff series was in 2005. And that was when McMillan was the head coach of a team that doesn't exist anymore. The Seattle Supersonics. They beat the Kings in 5 games before losing to the Spurs in 6. That's the only playoff victory that a McMillan-coached team has. But at least they're in the playoffs. Pierce probably wasn't going to get the Hawks into the playoffs this year. McMillan can. He's a much better coach than Lloyd Pierce. You know, it's funny, when I heard that McMillan was taking over for Pierce, because I didn't know that he went to the Hawks, a part of me thought that maybe there was some backdoor agreement between McMillan and Travis Schlenk, Hawks GM. If Pierce struggles, he's going to be on a short leash and you'll take over. It doesn't seem like that was the case. Because, like I said, we learned that McMillan and Pierce are good friends. So, look, McMillan got this job honestly. He'll do a good job with the Hawks. The Hawks did improve here. Nate McMillan is a better coach than Lloyd Pierce. How many teams can you say that about? That one of their assistant coaches is better than their head coach? You'd have to think about it. Now, Pierce will land on his feet. He should be commended for the work he did in helping develop Trae Young, John Collins, DeAndre Hunter, Kevin Huerter, and Cam Reddish. If you're a younger team, like, let's say, the Kings, and you decide to move on from your head coach, you could do a lot worse than bringing in Lloyd Pierce. Very good at developing young players. Will the teams be good? I don't know. It's tough to say. There's no question that the Hawks would be better if the injury bug didn't besiege them. But prior to this year, the Hawks hadn't come anywhere close to making the playoffs. Last year, they only finished with 20 wins. But Pierce is worthy of getting a second chance. There's no question about that. All in all, I know why the Hawks did this. They are underachieving this year. There's no question about that. And Nate McMillan is a better coach. So, I'm telling you, the Hawks got better. Having said that, though, the Hawks being bad this year really isn't his fault. There's no question in my mind that Pierce will land on his feet. He will get another job in the NBA. Maybe not as a head coach right away, but definitely as an assistant. And he deserves it because, like I said, he should be commended for the work he did in developing the Hawks' young core. I don't think he's a terrible head coach. I just don't think he's as good as Nate McMillan. Moving on now to Nets Spurs. And I'm not talking about this because I'm a Nets fan. There's a lot to break down with this game. Firstly, the insane stat line by James Harden. 30 points, 14 rebounds, 15 assists, no turnovers. He is the only player in NBA history to record that stat line. He recorded his 7th triple-double as a member of the Nets. You know how many games he's played in with the Nets? 22. That means in almost a third of his games, he's had a triple-double. He already has the second most triple-doubles by a Net in franchise history. Yes, it is pathetic that outside of Jason Kidd and James Harden, no Net has had 7 triple-doubles. But the fact that Harden, in such a short period of time, is putting up monster stat lines is nothing short of mind-blowing. Since Harden was traded to the Nets, they've gone 16-7. They've went from being a team that would have to go through the play-in tournament, which I really don't like. I understand having it for this year because it's a shortened season, but don't have it when we go back to 82 games. Now, the Nets are only a half game behind the Sixers for the 1 seed in the East. The Nets also did something that they haven't done in a regular season game since January 22nd, 2002. And I did not realize this until it was mentioned on the broadcast. That was the last time that the Nets beat the Spurs in San Antonio. They did beat the Spurs in Game 2 of the 03 NBA Finals in San Antonio, but how much does that really mean? The Nets have played the Spurs in San Antonio in the regular season every year. that's how the schedule works. To have gone winless since '02? That's incredible. I didn't know that. Give Harden a ton of credit for helping the Nets overcome that. Give Kyrie Irving a ton of credit also. He had 27 points. Bruce Brown. We talk about the big three, Durant, Harden, Irving. Then maybe you'd get to Joe Harris. Maybe DeAndre Jordan. And those may be all the guys that the casual NBA fan knows for the Nets. But if you follow the team closely like I do, you know how invaluable Bruce Brown is. Hitting those left corner threes, getting those floaters to rim in. And this guy plays every position. He started games at center. The guy's 6'4". He's actually played center. And it's worked. I saw an article, I didn't read it, but it said that we need to come up with a new position for what Bruce Brown is playing for the Nets. I don't know who wrote it, but that person's not wrong. Him and Jeff Green are the unsung heroes for this Nets team. And Nick Claxton. Freaking Nick Claxton. I'm calling for the Nets to trade for Mason Plumlee or Isaiah Stewart. Claxton must have heard me because the guy had his best game ever in the NBA. He had 17 points. He had 3 blocks. I don't want to say that Claxton should be the Nets' backup center for the whole season. But for the foreseeable future, let it ride. Now, the Nets almost had me go on this show to scream my head off about him. Because watching the end of the fourth quarter, I got flashbacks to their epic choke job against the Wizards. They had a 10-point lead with under 2 minutes left. Lonnie Walker hit a 3, then he blocked a James Harden layup. DeAndre Jordan turned the ball over. Patty Mills hit a 3. Kyrie Irving missed a 3. DeMar DeRozan hit a layup. Kyrie blew the easiest layup he'll ever get in his life. And then DeJounte Murray, after falling down, nearly losing his dribble, popped up and tied the game. Yeah, I was ticked off. But the Nets dominated overtime. They never trailed. In the last 2 minutes of overtime, the Spurs didn't score a point. The Nets won. That's all that matters. This isn't the NHL where the other team gets a point for an overtime loss. A win is a win is a win. Should they have won it in regulation? The answer is yes. Does it matter at the end of the day? The answer is no. The Nets do have to work on some things, like closing games out. But they should be happy with the win and the fact that they only turned the ball over 5 times. That has been an issue for the Nets. Give them credit. For 51 minutes, they were the better team yesterday. It was just those final 2 minutes in the fourth quarter that they weren't. And you know what? They got the win. That's all that matters. Moving on now to Jazz Pelicans. And the Pelicans pulled off a pretty big upset yesterday. They knocked off the Jazz 129 to 124. Give the Pelicans credit for looking like the better team all throughout that game yesterday. I mean, I like the Jazz. I think they have a great chance of representing the West in the NBA Finals. So for the Pelicans to beat them as handedly as they did, that was impressive. I mean, the Pelicans really had control through most of the game, with the exception of the second quarter and the first half of the third quarter. But even then, they were keeping it close. They were matching the Jazz's every point. At one point, they had a 16-point lead in the fourth quarter. Against the NBA's best team, that's impressive. Zion went off. He had a double-double, 26 points and 10 rebounds. Brandon Ingram had 26 points also. Lonzo Ball nearly had a triple-double, 23 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. JJ Redick had 2 4-point plays in this game. He ended up with 17 points. Give the Pelicans credit. Everyone who needed to show up yesterday for him showed up. I mean, the same can be said for the Jazz. They weren't awful yesterday. They made it close at the end. Like I said, they were down by 16 at one point in the fourth quarter. They only lost by 5. Bogdanovich went off. He had 31 points. Gobert nearly had a double-double. 22 points, 9 rebounds. Donovan Mitchell nearly had a double-double. 21 points, 8 assists. He did shoot just 1 for 8 from beyond the arc. I don't like that. But I do like the production that the Jazz got from their point guards. Mike Conley had 10 points and 8 assists. Off the bench, Jordan Clarkson had 20 points. Like I said, the Jazz weren't bad. The Pelicans were just better. And don't discount the possibility of the Pelicans going on a big run. They have a very talented roster, a great coach in Stan Van Gundy. They're only 3.5 games behind the Warriors for the 8th seed in the West. It's not impossible. It's not incredibly likely, but it's not impossible. Alright, now I'll give you some college basketball Valk talk. And I'll start with a rare Monday night matchup between 2 ranked teams. That was Oklahoma State. And the Cowboys won. They beat the Sooners by 4, 79-75. Every time I watch Cade Cunningham, I just get more and more impressed by him. The guy played every second of that game yesterday. Now, early on in that game, Cunningham did not look good. He was used as a distraction, so guys like Caleb Boone and Bryce Williams and Avery Anderson could go off. But then, as we got closer to winning time, Cunningham stepped up. He got to the line a lot. He converted on his penetrating opportunities. For a freshman to step up like he did, with the entire college basketball world watching, that's impressive to me. I know Cunningham has some competition for being the first overall pick in the upcoming NBA draft. But guys like Evan Mobley, Jalen Green, and Jonathan Kuminga have a really high mountain to climb if they want to unseat Cunningham. As of right now, he's my first overall pick. As for the Sooners, they're picking the wrong time to go cold. They've lost their last 3. Last Tuesday, they got upset by a dismal Kansas State team, and they just got swept by Oklahoma State. That's inexcusable. To get swept by your rivals this late in the season, that's not going to work. Can the Sooners still make noise in the big dance? The answer is yes. They certainly have the talent for it. And you saw it on display yesterday. Their starting 5 went off. Brady Manek had 20 points. He may have been the best player on either side. Austin Reeves was really impressive. He had 19 points. Davion Harmon had 14 points. Umoja Gibson had 13 points. And Elijah Harkless played his usual stingy defense. I was a little surprised to not see Harkless on Cunningham more than I did. I thought that was a bad job by Lon Kruger. Then again, Cunningham wasn't the one killing you for most of that game. It was just in the final 8 or so minutes. So I understand forgetting about him. This was a really impressive win for the Cowboys. They're going to be a really tough team to beat in March. In most of their games, they'll have the best player on the floor. As for the Sooners, they've got to go on a big run in the conference tournament. Regain some of that confidence, or else I'm putting them on upset alert. Alright, now it's time to preview tonight's 3 games between 2 ranked teams. And I'll start with Baylor traveling to WVU to face the Mountaineers. Even though the Bears got their doors blown off by the Jayhawks on Saturday, surprised the daylights out of me, I'm still really confident in them going forward. They have an incredibly talented roster. It's very well-rounded. I've gone through this team before. I'll rapid fire through the names. Jared Butler, Masio Teague, Davion Mitchell, Adam Flagler, Matthew Mayer, Mark Vidal, and Flo Thamba. They're all really, really talented. And they're coached by one of the best coaches in the nation, Scott Drew. I've met his father, Homer. Very nice man. They're going up against a good WVU team. All offense, no defense. I've said this before. This isn't Press Virginia. It's an offensive juggernaut led by Miles McBride, Derek Culver, Taz Sherman, and Sean McNeil. This is going to be a great game. I'm going to try to put it on while I'm driving to Newark. Well, I'm not the one driving. My friend Mark is. I'll see if he'll let me have the game on. All in all, I think Baylor's the better team. I think they have the deeper roster. Even though the game's at WVU, I'm going to go back to the well. Give me the Bears. Moving on now to Illinois, Michigan. Two of my favorite teams going at it. I love both these teams this year. The Illini are led by one of the best dynamic duos in the nation, Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn. An honorable mention goes to Trent Frazier. Very, very good shooter. And on the other side of things, you've got the Wolverines. One of the most well-rounded teams in the nation. Hunter Dickinson, Isaiah Livers, Franz Wagner, Eli Brooks, Mike Smith, and Chauncey Brown. Again, I've gone over these teams before, so I'm going to rapid fire through them. Juwan Howard should be commended for what he's done with that program. Did an excellent job in taking over for John Beilein. All in all, I think Michigan is going to win this game. That's nothing against Illinois. I think Illinois is going to be overlooked in brackets this year. They shouldn't be. Very talented team, but they're not as deep as the Wolverines. I'm going with Michigan. The last game to talk about features me going back to the Big Ten. It's Wisconsin versus Purdue. I've spoken about Wisconsin before, but not Purdue. Wisconsin is more well-rounded than you'd think. I like Demetric Trice and Micah Potter. They're both capable of going off on any given night. Same thing with a good shooter like Brad Davison. And Aleem Ford and Nate Roovers have talent also. Jonathan Davis and Tyler Wall are also really good defenders. The knock on Wisconsin is that they can't score. Sure, by the numbers they can't. But they do have guys capable of putting up big games. They are a much better defensive team, though. I will say that. As for Purdue, it's nice to see them back in the top 25. They're similar to Wisconsin. They're better defensively than they are offensively, but they do have guys capable of going off. Travion Williams, Sasha Stefanovic, Eric Hunter, Jaden Ivey, Brandon Newman, and Zach Edey. Wisconsin has better defensive players, though. Purdue is so good defensively because of the scheme that Matt Painter uses. And I like Painter a lot. One of the better coaches in the nation. There's a reason that he's been at Purdue for so long. This is the game that I'm having the hardest time picking. It's really 51-49 to me. It wouldn't stun me if I got this wrong because these teams are so evenly matched. But ultimately, I'm going to go with the roster that I think is better. And that is the Badgers. Sorry, Boilermakers fans. Alright, now I'm going to do something that I usually don't like doing, but it works for today. I'm going to talk about one story from hockey, baseball, and football. I'll start with hockey. And that is the Maple Leafs shutting out the Oilers yesterday. Now, it's not news that the Leafs beat the Oilers. They should have beaten the Oilers. But it is noteworthy that Michael Hutchinson got the shutout. It wasn't Frederick Anderson. It was Hutchinson, the almost hero of the Colorado Avalanche in their playoff series against the Stars last year. And he was really impressive yesterday. He stopped all 31 shots. And these weren't cupcake shots either. He had to make some really nice saves. And we all know that the Oilers have talented players on their roster. McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, etc., etc. And they're a really good team right now. They're 14-10. They're second in the North Division. It may be hard to follow the teams that aren't in your division because you don't see them this year, but the Oilers are gifted offensively. Not defensively, though. But they are an incredibly talented offensive team. I've gotten some heat in the past for my views on the Leafs, and this has nothing to do with Tavares. It's just that I'm not sure how well built they are for playoff success. I don't love their defense, and I'm not the biggest Frederick Anderson fan in the world. But you know what? This Leafs offense is really impressive. Anytime you can score 3 goals on 10 shots on the starting goalie, in this case Mikko Koskinen, and chase him from the game, you're doing something right. I do think the Leafs are going to go on a really big run. And it wouldn't stun me if they won the Stanley Cup. They're the best team in hockey right now. It's not even close. But I'm just not crazy about their defense. I think they're vulnerable to an offense-heavy team. Ironically, I could see the Oilers giving them trouble in a 7-game series. If not them, then maybe the Blues, the Capitals, the Hurricanes, or even the Blackhawks. But the Leafs do have a very good chance of winning the Stanley Cup. Their offense is that talented. I'm just not sold on their defense. That's all it is. Moving on now to a big extension finally being made official. And that is Hunter Dozier's 4-year extension with the Royals. It's worth $25 million guaranteed. It can max out at $49 million. I understand that teams are more motivated than ever to lock up their young guns on cheap contracts. But Dozier isn't a young gun. He's not young. He's 29 years old. And he's not a gun. Last year he had 228. With 6 homers and 12 RBIs. Now in 2019, he was great. He had 279 with 26 homers and 84 RBIs, and he led the majors in triples with 10. But I do think that 2019 was an aberration. I'd be very surprised if Dozier came anywhere close to duplicating that. I understand that this is just for $6.25 million a year. And look, if Dozier hits all his escalators and bonuses, he'll be worth the $49 million maximum value. But to lock this guy up for 4 years? Why? What's the hurry? He's not that good. I mean, let's talk about why the Royals even drafted Dozier in the first place. It was because he'd signed for a below-slot deal. Yes, it enabled them to take Sean Mania, but they ended up trading Mania to the Athletics before he ever pitched a game for him. I do not like this move. I don't think it's going to work out. For a team as cost-conscious as the Royals, $6.25 million is a lot of money. I can't get behind this deal. I don't think it's going to work. The last story to talk about is the Bears cutting Buster Skrine. Hey, fellow Jets fans, remember Buster Skrine? Remember how bad he was? Yeah. He wasn't much better with the Bears. Last year, he had just a 52.3 overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. Skrine was supposed to be a lockdown slot corner for the Jets. It was one of the first moves that Mike McCagnon made as Jets GM. Of course it failed. Although he did last his full contract, which is impressive. You don't see that too often. The reality is Skrine isn't that good. I'd be surprised if he got another opportunity in the NFL. The only team that I could see taking a chance on him would be the Buccaneers, so that he could play under Todd Bowles again. And they do need to add corners, there's no question. But they could do a lot better than Skrine. It wouldn't stun me if he ended up in Tampa, but for the Buccaneers' sake, I hope they steer clear from him. He's just not that good. Add better corners in the draft or free agency. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about my experience at the Islanders-Devils game. I think you'll find it interesting what I had to go through to watch my favorite hockey team. I'm not doing it because it's me. I just think it's an interesting snapshot into watching sports live in this coronavirus climate. Until then, I am Jacob Valk saying that I got blisters from swinging 8 billion times in practice. That resulted in me going 0 for 5 in the game.